Hello and welcome to Data Conversations Over Coffee with myself, Craig Stewart. It's actually been a while since I've recorded a podcast. I think maybe I needed a little bit of a break. I've done nearly 50 since April, so it was fast and furious stuff, but made really easy, I guess, by the guests that I had on the show. And also been really busy running virtual roundtables between here, South Africa, in the Middle East, and also in Pakistan more recently, which was really interesting to start to understand a little bit about what's happening from a data analytics perspective in Pakistan. I love going into emerging markets and sort of those countries where data analytics maturity is maybe a little bit lower, but on the rise because people are so enthusiastic. And I think someone who can talk about that really well is my guest today, a good friend of ours, Hartnell Ndungi, who is the Chief Data Officer of Absa Bank in Kenya, and also recently part of our top 100 global data and analytics innovators. Hartnell, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Craig, and I'm happy to be on the show.
Yeah, it's good to have you. Hartnell, maybe we can just kick off a little bit of background into yourself. You've been a Chief Data Officer now for 2 years, part of the Absa Group, and the Absa Group is very strong in terms of their Chief Data Officer sort of structures and setups. Obviously got Shreya and Maciek who work a lot with us, but there's a couple of others. Gavin Cope comes to mind as well. So maybe you can give us a little bit of background, the journey that you've had as a Chief Data Officer. You know, it's been 2 years. What have been some of the highs and lows, if any, that you've had?
Thanks for the question, Craig. So I'll start off by just mentioning that my journey as a data officer actually started 11 years back, not really 2 years back. And I said when we didn't have most professionals speaking about data, we had database administrators, we had people who are system developers. And luckily for me, I had the interest in IT, and I was able to start practicing how to use code. And that's where I came across the database, and I was able to understand how data sits and what are the nitty-gritties of actually ensuring that you store your data properly. But what got my attention was actually when I started doing some consulting engagements as myself firstly, then as KPMG. And I was able to actually start seeing how data is being used for forensic data analysis. And at that point as well, I saw that most organizations are actually shifting away from using experience to run the organizations and mostly into using data insights and data points to make more decisions and better decisions in their companies. So in my different stints as a consultant, doing IT advisory, forensic advisory, a bit of financial advisory, mostly supporting the normal audit cycles, I was able to actually gain the interest in using data for decision making. When we are actually relying on Basel II, and most people are thinking of how do you start moving away from IS-39, I was also able to guide some companies in how to implement the new guideline properly. And that's the time that BCBS 239, the data governance regulation, was actually coming into place and taking shape. And I just knew that I had to start delving into data, not only looking at how do you use data for business intelligence, but also for data governance. Fast forward to now, as you mentioned, around 2 years back, I joined Absa. Journey has been exciting, I can tell you. Previously, I was able to hire a team of close to 35 people in my previous employer. Different skills in data, people who had never used or been in any kind of data team before. I was able to train them. We had the best kind of trainers coming from all over the world. And within Absa, we got the right kind of support. The trainer at the top was the excellent coming from the country management committee as well as the managing director. We were able to set up a very diverse team. As you mentioned, this is a regional team sitting within Kenya. And within the country, there's a lot of competition. I think people know about mobile money. And the journey has been great. We have been able to develop skills in data science, business intelligence, data governance. And I'm happy to just see that out of more than 100 recruitments I've done, I do have a very big team right now, people who are experts in data. And I'm actually playing a part in shaping how data is used within the country.
Yeah. I mean, that's a fantastic story. I think the fact that you've hired so many people obviously talks to the, I guess, the awareness of data analytics within Kenya, because one of the biggest issues that most organizations face in any geography that we work into is really, I guess, a lack of really qualified skills. People that you can bring in and build a team of 100. I mean, you can always have the ambition and the roadmap to get to 100, 150 people, but if the skills don't exist, you'll never get there. So I'd assume maybe you can talk a little bit then about, the awareness and state of maturity of data analytics in general in Kenya. It seems like a lot of people are obviously going into that as a career, which is fantastic.
Yeah, it's fantastic, I can tell you. And I'm also seeing most of the colleges and the universities creating new data programs. We do have some companies who have seen the gap earlier than most of our universities saw it before, and were actually able to come up with simple bootcamp kind of colleges where people will come in and be able to learn about data science, data governance. But you're right. I think we started talking about data becoming the new oil 3 or 4 years back, but this is the time that we're actually seeing this. Obviously, with the acceleration driven by COVID, but we're actually getting a lot of maturity, one within the telecommunication industry, the financial sector, and as well as the insurance sector. Within the banking sector, which is part of the financial services sector, I think the story of M-Pesa really drove people to see new opportunities within the financial services industry. And we couldn't, as banks, sit behind and stay away from the opportunity. So people started seeing, with the large amounts of data that banks hold, how can we start getting better insights? How do we retain our customers better? And again, the threat of new entrants, when you actually talk about the small startups that come up and be able to create solutions that are based on data, we have seen so many peer-to-peer lending software and companies coming into play. We have seen companies who are able to lend and use the similar model delivered by M-Pesa to loan money on the mobile phone. And this is cutting across not only in Kenya, but also in East Africa. So if you look at general landscape, number one, you're right by saying that the skills are actually developing at a very rapid scale. We're getting more people who are either changing their line of work or their specialties into data. What I see mostly within the data engineering space, you're having the IT specialists now becoming data engineers, and you're having people who are basic guys in mathematics or statistics who are now fully going into data science. So your actuaries are also getting this kind of interest. We are seeing the guys who are playing in the insurance sector coming into the banking space, knowing that they have more data, more use cases to play around with. Looking at maturity-wise, we do have pockets of companies who are doing so well. And this is driven by, obviously, the funding and ability to support that kind of investment. It's expensive, actually, to get the right kind of skills and get the right kind of program to support data analytics. So we are getting some banks, mostly Tier 1 and Tier 2 banks, who are investing very well, and they're able to show that using data, they're able to double their profits. I've worked for one and consulted for another, now my other one. And I'm actually can state that the financial services sector is being driven largely by the telcos, the startups, and the banks who are actually putting their money where their mouth is.
Yeah.
With regards to the other sectors, it's slowly catching along. You're talking about your normal brick and mortar organizations, either your production or manufacturing. We are having new roles being recruited, but what I'm seeing mostly that every now and then when you get a new job description, they will obviously have a rider and a line down there, have some analytic skills or have some data skills, which is just showing that people are also appreciating that you have to have not only word skills and presentation skills, but also data skills.
Yeah, the full stack. And I think what's been said a lot about Kenya or the East African market is that from a technology point of view, companies tend to sort of leapfrog developments elsewhere, kind of almost lag behind, and then make this massive jump into, mobile money was, M-Pesa is probably the global sort of standard for, a country that managed to have that innovation so quickly without going through all the other channels. So I'd assume then that data analytics is really pushing competitive advantage or being able to keep up with your competitors, because it's clear that companies move really fast from a technology point of view. So is that why you think data analytics has become so critical? Is that you've just got to keep up with your competitors and maybe even try and advance on them?
Yeah, it's true. I fully agree with you, Craig. You have to keep up with Genesis. Your competitors are actually coming hard and strong. I also have to mention that the rate of direct foreign investment, I think if you look at the reports from World Bank and most of the VC reports out there, you're seeing that Africa is getting out of focus. And you're speaking about South Africa, West Africa, Nigeria, Ghana, and also East Africa, where you're having a focus of Rwanda, Tanzania, Kenya. So you're actually seeing that most people are able to raise the money required to actually come up with new kind of ideas. And your competitors are actually not the big corporates who have been there for a long time. That's the basic startups. So that threat of new entrants and the threat of being left behind is actually causing this maturity to actually leapfrog. And I'm happy you mentioned about that phenomena whereby people are not going through the normal maturity cycle. People are actually leapfrogging across the cycles. If you talk about data maturity, I've actually seen that some companies are not only starting their maturity journeys late, but they're able to quickly be able to catch up with the rest of the other companies. A good example for myself is that we are actually able to, my last maturity journey for a big bank, I was able to run this in close to 2.5 years. But where I am at Absa, we have seen this actually move pretty fast. Within 1 year, we are actually crossing 3 levels of maturity, which is unheard of before. Meaning that a combination of the threat of new entrants, a combination of the need to not be left behind is forcing companies to think out of the box. And that means accelerate, accelerate, accelerate.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people watching this will be thinking, how on earth did you manage to do that? Such a massive leapfrog in the data analytics maturity in your organization. And that's really at the heart of our conversation today. And let me just set the scene for people who are watching this. I first met Hartnell, I think, back in 2019 or 2018 at our Chief Data and Analytics Officer event, where you presented on how you take the organization on the various through the various levels of maturity. And having run conferences for a long time and done the data conferences for a long time, I sat there, and no discredit or disrespect to anybody else that's presented at our conferences, but it was one of the most practical, real, and most valuable presentations I've seen. And I looked out at the audience. I can see they were absolutely glued to this, going, this is it. This is kind of a light bulb moment. So I've lent on you a lot over the last couple of years to do this presentation. Virtually, physically in Dubai, etc. I think it's a great story. So without, normally you can do this in half an hour, Hartnell, at an event. So maybe we don't have as much time. Maybe 10 minutes today. Maybe
I'll do it in 5 minutes.
Yeah, great. Just walk us through that. How do you go and assess the maturity of an organization, data analytics maturity, and then how do you move them from one level to the next?
Awesome. Thanks for asking this. And yes, I'll try and keep the 5 to 7 minutes timeline. And it's true that I have done this before. And let me just give some insight that people don't know. When I first did this presentation, I actually sat down and just researched about different maturity levels. I was able to see what other companies have come up with. But to devise a way of moving up the ladder and moving up the different layers of maturity, actually it was my own self-making. So having tried this before as a consultant, and also in my first opportunity where I was able to practice the whole scale of maturity growth, I noticed that there are some ways that people recommend in your textbooks or maybe in your consultancy decks, but there's no practical way of doing it. No simple executable steps of how to get there. So I'll simplify it today. So there are usually 5 levels of maturity, in exception of some standards. I've gone through more than 30 standards. Most of the standards only have 5 levels. So you can call them level 1 to level 5. If you're using Gartner, I will call them, number 1 is basic. Number 2 is opportunistic. You have systematic. You have differentiating, then transformative. So those are 5 levels. If you're talking about the Data Warehouse Institute, also they have the other names. So for simplicity, I'll call them level 1 to level 5, and I'll just describe them. So level 1 is whereby you're unaware about data analytics. You have a brick and mortar company. You're not fortunate to be born in the age whereby data is driving organizational transformation. And you're just either manufacturing or selling services or banking or selling products in the banking sector. And you don't have skills on how data is supposed to be used to grow and transform an organization. Level 2 is actually when you start seeing some opportunities. Either you go out and start noticing what people are doing, attend Craig's conference, get to see Hartnell present and say, okay, this is my aha moment. Let me go back and start seeing how I can start building data skills. And this level is called opportunistic. And you start creating opportunities in the organization, either by getting some task force to start implementing some data automations, start adopting POCs for some of your data elements and data use cases. Level 3 is whereby people now see the opportunity and they decide to create a systematic way of doing this. And that's why it's called systematic. So on level 3, you come together and say, once the POC was done, we were happy with the results. And we want to create now some standards on how we can scale this up in the organization. Level 4 is whereby you now understand the value. You have made sure that you have your data governance in check. And you are actually doing this not only in one department or team, but in the whole enterprise. Previously, this level used to be called enterprise, but now it's actually being called differentiating, whereby you're differentiating yourself from the competitors. Last level is obviously transformative, whereby we are actually transforming the organization. So those are the 5 simplified levels of maturity. Now, I usually run some polls to know where people are at, but I'll just give you a sense check of how you know where you are and how do you move to the next. You are on level 1 basic, if number 1, you are solely relying on the data from your systems for reporting. And most of the reporting is done on Excel or any simplistic accounting tool. That's level 1. If you tell people to invest in data, they don't see the need and the sense to invest in data. How do you get yourself off that level? Is number 1, you have to create the need for data analytics. And this is obviously by either presenting, sharing this webinar, or calling Craig to actually talk about data. But there are multiple ways of actually getting people to be excited about data. Luckily, most of the MDs and large organizations are actually getting this interest from consultants. But that's the first thing. After you're done with this, then you have to run to your POC very fast. Get a sponsor, get someone who can support you, go to the next level. If you're able to get your POC working well, then you're done with level 1. Level 2 is actually where you start creating some opportunities. Get some funding, either use existing software, create some reports, create some automated tools, and accept these POCs. If you go to some of these conferences, Tableau is there, you're having ClickView, guys who are ready to give you a free POC for 6 months to showcase this. Get this on board, be able to show people the value, go to level 3. Now, how do you know that you've moved from level 3? If more than 50% of your reports are automated and able to create some savings, either in time or costs, in the way you use data, you're on level 3. On level 3, focus on your standards. Ensure that you have someone who can speak to data governance, data architecture, management as data as an asset. And at this level is whereby you scale up your POC, start automating more reports, start creating use cases. Get a data scientist or a psychologist who is able to start creating some use cases for you about data. And once you start seeing the opportunities and when the organization is ready to invest, you are now on level 4, which is actually you're differentiating. At this level, I usually tell people, get the right funding. If you're going to actually compete, you have to get the right kind of skills, the right kind of tools and architecture. Ensure that you have the right kind of support. And using most maturity models, this is when actually you're having most people hiring a CDO. But if you're fortunate like Absa to hire me earlier, then I'll walk you through the journey faster. And that's how I was able to do it in 1 year. And level 5 is whereby the whole strategy is run by data. People are able to create use cases, new business products from data. The board, the senior management, everyone starts their conversations with data. And getting there is hard, but staying there is actually harder. That's a summary of the 5 levels of maturity, Craig.
Oh, I think I was on mute there. Yeah, it was a good summary. Thank you. And I think it is something that you can go into a lot more detail. And I know that you'd be happy for people to reach out to kind of get the sort of more detailed approach and kind of maybe understand what level they're at. How long?
They are at.
Yeah, and how long do you think it's generally takes for an organization to move through these stages? Is that determined by, obviously their executive support, how data-driven they are, their data literacy, etc.? So can it be done quite quickly, or do you sort of suggest that you move through the phases cautiously and make sure that things are embedded before you try and run to the end?
So this is a tricky question, Craig. And as a consultant, and the consultant is telling me to answer it in the best way possible by saying it depends. But I can summarize it this way: it's actually, there are only two approaches of doing this. The organic approach is whereby you are keen to let this take shape over time. So number one, you let people learn about the importance of data. You take them through the steps gradually. This will take you a cool 2 to 4 years, depending on how fast you are and what support you get. If you want to sprint, then you have to get all the prerequisites of level 3 and 4 earlier in level 1. And what is that? Exactly what you've just mentioned. So your funding, your sponsor, you need someone. You will not be able to change the mind of all senior executives, but you just need one. Either your C-level executive, your CEO, or your strategy director, or any other director who's able to support you to help you get this journey and the audience you require as early as possible. So if you leapfrog most of these things, including hiring the right skills early in advance, then you can do it in 1 year to 2 years from experience.
Yeah. And I think that's also where companies or people in the data office are getting maybe frustrated or caught out, in that they've been almost pushed to move really quickly, that the return on investment in analytics needs to happen now. But it takes a lot longer to get maybe you can have some quick win use cases, but to get to a state where you are totally data driven and everything's automated, all decisions are made from the insights that come from the analytics, takes a long time. And people have to be patient, but at the same time, as a chief data officer, head of analytics, whatever it may be, you still need to kind of show those quick wins to keep people engaged and excited the whole way through, and investing, because you talk a lot about funding.
Yeah, so I'll just go straight on and give the advice for this. With this day and age, post-COVID, if there's anything like post-COVID, start showing value from day one. And the only thing you need to do is just track your milestones, because most of the time our milestones are based on we completed a project or we had a resource. Please append to these milestones what the value is. If it's a simple thing like making a recruitment, within the first 1 or 2 months, show the value that comes out of this. I'll actually now run everything I do using a value tracker. I'm able to tell you what costs I've saved, what is the efficiency created, what is the income that is going to be created, and what is projected to be created. This is something that has actually caught up with us as data experts. You have to start showing value early. So it may not be much, but I'm sure nobody will chase you off the office if you actually tell them that I made 1 cent today, and the projection is that I can make 10 cents in the next 1 year. It's a better conversation instead of waiting, investing, and then asking for an ROI report. It's very hard to prove this in this day and age.
Yeah. And if anybody's watching and they've got questions for Hartnell, obviously this is not live, put your question in the comments section on the YouTube channel, and I'll forward them on to Hartnell, or sort of give him access to answer those, because it is such a fascinating way to look at things that I'd love for your questions to be able to be answered by Hartnell as they come up. So tell me a little bit. Let's move into then from the maturity. The data office can really push and advocate and evangelize data analytics across the organization. But if it's not a data-first culture, it's effectively. I'm having a massive thunderstorm here in Joburg, so excuse me if there's noise and I jump a little bit. If you don't have everybody using data, and if data is not first, you're not going to get to this point. So how do you create a data first culture?
So the culture piece is very interesting. And I can say this because this is one of the largest stumbling block for most of the data experts and most of the data strategies. And I can say it as the same way I'm dealing the value and the return on investment challenge. I think it's something that as experts going forward, we have to start dealing as early as possible. I think most people use the word agile and use the word new ways of working and using the word collaboration. But the trick of ensuring that people change their culture is getting them engaged. Be in their space, but with only good news. Don't come and tell them that their reports will take 5 hours longer. Come to them and tell them that you have a new solution for them to run self-service. Throw in a free training, forward them some links on some webinars, call them for conferences. When you're asked by Craig to bring someone extra, call a business person to come with them. Because you are right, Craig, if you don't have the right kind of culture, you may make the best reports out of data science, but nobody will use them. So it's key to just note that culture is important. And I can give 3 tips of how to ensure that you gain this culture. Number 1, use a combination of a top-down and a bottom-up approach. When you're actually speaking about culture, you can't go to the senior execs and start telling them about the value from your data program before going down to the person who actually keys in this report. So if you're actually going to approach this, it must be a 2-pronged approach. Talk to the executives, but also talk to the guy who's a simple analyst who just wants to know, how do I use your data? The second tip I can give you is make people's life easy. So always give solutions.
Yeah.
So when you're actually going, don't really meet milestones and say, I was able to transform the company. Tell the person who is sitting in business how you've been able to make their work and their lives better. And the last one is actually make data fun. It's not about speaking the best technical lingo that will get you being appreciated. Simplify the speak in data. So when you're talking about data science, don't tell them data science. Tell them that this is actually helping you predict, and this is what prediction means. I've seen that over time, simplifying the concepts of data, no matter how hard they are, actually makes guys appreciate data more, and that drives their culture on adoption.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's the thing. And I think if you get into that point of self-service analytics where, business people can actually go and sort of play with the data themselves and come up with their own insights and kind of see how it all works and sort of feel like they've accomplished something, they've come up with that insight on their own, really helps to embed that culture. Yeah. I think if you kind of keep it, locked down in the data office and the analytics teams and no one else is allowed to touch it, we'll give you the insights. That's when you start to lose the support of the organization.
True. Yeah. Self-service, federation, whatever you may call it, get the guys involved, let them play with the data, give them the access, and push some trainings to them as well. Yeah. They'll also benefit from learning 1 or 2 new things.
Yeah, great stuff. All right, Hartnell, it's been great to chat to you. Thanks so much for your time and your insight. And as I said, anybody watching this, hit like on the video, put your question in the comment section. I'll forward it on to Hartnell and you will hopefully get a response from him over time. Hartnell, before I let you go, as is customary on the show, tell us a little bit about your relationship with coffee or tea, or neither of those. What's your sort of go-to drink?
Okay, I'll stick to coffee since it's a coffee show. I can say in Kenya we have multiple grades of coffee. There's obviously the Nyeri coffee, there's Volcania coffee, there's Java coffee. My preference is obviously Java coffee. Yeah. But when I'm actually in the house, we have some brick and mortar coffee that is called Kahawa number 1. So I brew it myself and I'm able to make it. So that's my take on coffee. Yeah. But Kenyans, we love tea. I can tell you we take tea any time of the day. So in the morning when you're tired, before you have lunch. So we actually adopted it in a very strict way and we practice it to the latter.
All right. Yeah, that's
but anytime, coffee works for me.
Good. Yeah, good stuff. As you'll see, I don't have any coffee. It's a bit late in the afternoon for me. So I'm not really to the rules of the show. Yeah, so all good. Hartnell, my friend, thank you so much. It's been fascinating talking to you. Thank you for the insights.
Thank you,
we hope to chat to you soon.